Before we jump into today's episode, I want to make an announcement. Capstone Leadership Solutions, which was co founded more than 14 years ago by two registered nurses, we're getting back to our roots by offering a nursing excellence event. We know that every rural hospital wants to promise and provide exceptional nursing care. But nursing excellence doesn't just happen because some nurses are great. It happens when every caregiver delivers consistent, evidence based care, every patient, every shift, every day. So we hope you will join us on August 11th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for a free webinar where we'll be overviewing the same proven 5-step approach. We call it the Capstone Adoption Method that we've used to help rural hospitals improve patient experience, strengthen teamwork, increase consistency, and create nursing improvements that take hold and last. This webinar is free. Again, it's on August 11th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can go to our website, capstoneleadership.net, and go to our resources page where we have all of our upcoming events listed. Or you can email us at info, I-N-F-O, at capstoneleadership.net, and we can email you the registration link. Now on to today's episode. So today, I'm going to walk you through 4 types of untapped potential that I see sitting inside almost every rural healthcare organization, and why tapping them is almost always a faster, cheaper, lower risk strategy than chasing something new.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzloff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. It is me, Sue Tetzloff, co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions and the host of Culture Change RX. Today is one of those solo episodes, so just me here with you today for this weekly episode. And I'm going to focus today on one of the things I talked about during our recent Healthcare Executive Forum. So this is an annual event where we have executives from small and rural healthcare organizations across the country gathered together. And this was number 14. And this year's topic was about strategic clarity and execution certainty. And one of the things that I spoke about specifically related to strategic clarity, about preparing strategic plans, developing our strategic priorities, getting ready to execute under the area of strategy development. One of the things that I talked about was something that I phrase as untapped potential. So the premise is this, that most often the biggest lever is not about adding something new, it's tapping what's already there. So what I mean by that is before you greenlight your next big initiative, I want you to ask one question. What's already inside your organization that you're not fully using? Now, I'm not talking about what you're underfunding. I'm talking about what you're underseeing, the growth you haven't claimed, the capacity you paid for, but you aren't using or optimizing, the loyalty that you haven't built in your market, and the ideas sitting in the people, in your people, your employees, your staff, your leaders that nobody has asked for. So today, I'm going to walk you through 4 types of untapped potential that I see sitting inside almost every rural healthcare organization, and why tapping them is almost always a faster, cheaper, lower risk strategy than chasing something new. So as I mentioned, this is part of the strategic clarity training that I provided recently at our healthcare executive forum. And truly, the room got quiet in a way that told me that this hit a nerve. So early in my career as a vice president inside a community hospital, I was always looking for that next big initiative. And I wasn't alone in this. This is a pretty common thing that is part of strategic planning discussions with various stakeholder groups, board members, executives, leaders, community members that come together to craft strategies for their local community hospital. Like, we love talking about a new service line, a new partnership, a new technology. That felt like strategy, right? But then I started paying attention to what we already had, right? So I worked with a rural hospital leadership team that we were getting ready to launch a new outpatient service. So we had spent months on the business plan, on recruiting a new provider, et cetera, et cetera. But then we did something simple. We pulled the data on our existing primary care and specialty clinic volumes. And what we saw was that we had existing capacity. Like, we didn't have to add more providers. We didn't have to add more clinic space. We had existing capacity, and our existing clinics were running at a fraction of their true capacity. And the bottleneck wasn't the staff. It wasn't space. It was process. It was actually our scheduling templates. So same providers, same exam rooms, they could add 20% more volumes without us hiring anyone else. So in that experience, I learned something I can never really unlearn, is that new rarely beats deeper. And it's something I can now help other executives identify and encourage them to identify when creating their next strategic plan. The best strategic move is almost always to look at what's already there before you spend another dollar or time and energy on something new. So let's look at 4 places of untapped potential. So 4 places where small and rural healthcare organizations almost always have unrealized potential sitting right there under their feet. This first area of untapped potential, I'm going to call the experience. And this is the one most leaders nod at and then never act on. So there are 2 experiences inside every healthcare organization: the patient experience and the employee experience. And most small and rural healthcare organizations are leaving both on the table. Good is the enemy of great. Good is not good enough. You've probably heard me say this time and time again if you've been a listener for any time of the podcast. So on the patient side, how many of your patients have a fine visit, right? So last month, how many had a fine visit, fine parking, fine front desk experience, fine provider, fine discharge, and then they go home and tell their neighbor it was fine. So fine doesn't drive loyalty. Fine doesn't drive referrals. Fine is the silent leak in your market share. So the patient who got a fine, okay, or good experience, you'll notice all of those are 4-letter words. These patients are one decision away from not choosing you. Fine does not create loyalty. Good does not create loyalty, referrals, positive word of mouth. And then on the employee side, the employee experience side, how many of your employees are not engaged, right? They are showing up, doing their job, going home throughout their day, not engaged. Not because they don't care, but because nobody's asked them to engage. Nobody's created a meaningful and purposeful way for them to contribute to the hospital that they work for, the organization that they work for. So the fix of this isn't a major cultural overhaul. It isn't a new engagement survey. It's sustained attention to the moments that drive loyalty on both sides. Every day, not once a year, right? So then when it comes to the second area where we have untapped potential, we're going to talk about untapped market. So there are patients in your primary market and patients in your secondary market who are not loyal to you yet. Maybe because of what we just talked about, right? Because of the experience that they have. So maybe they're using your ER. Maybe they're coming to your hospital for an urgent care visit. And then they're driving past you for imaging, surgery, maybe even their regular primary care, orthopedics, OB. So maybe they're not disloyal, but they're just not yet loyal. And there's a difference, right? Disloyal means that they left you on purpose. Not yet loyal means you never gave them a reason to stay. So when you treat them as not yet loyal, the strategy changes. You're not chasing new patients with advertising. You're not competing on a billboard. You're asking yourself and maybe asking them, why did they leave? Why did they choose someone else? Every patient who walks out your door without scheduling the next visit, who leaves for a competitor down the road, who doesn't refer their family and friends, is a market signal you are ignoring. And the strategy might be quite simple. Ask them and then fix it, right? At my community hospital, every 3 years at the start of our strategic planning cycle, we would go out and we would host 20 different town hall meetings throughout the Tri-County service area. We would go to business clubs. We would host community town hall meetings in schools, you name it. Like we were out there. And this was a place for us to talk to our community and ask them, right? And I recall one time when we were in this cycle of getting ready to plan and we were doing these town hall meetings, I recall when we realized really a common theme that we offered many services that our community didn't even know about. And this was the gap we needed to fill. This was the untapped potential. So it wasn't that they were saying that their experience was bad and they weren't choosing us. We had already fixed that in previous strategic planning cycles. We had heard that and we had worked greatly on that to move good to great and fine to exceptional. And so now what we were learning was they were coming to us for the services they knew about because they knew our services were good. They've had those experiences, but they weren't coming to us obviously for services that they didn't know that we even had. They just assumed for some reason that we didn't have certain services. And so this is when we came up with the idea again about engaging our employees for their contributions. So it wasn't about spending more marketing dollars because you might go there, right? But this was an opportunity to engage our staff to be ambassadors, chief marketing officers, that every employee could be geared up to make contributions to be a chief marketing officer for the organization that they work for and spread the word to their family and friends. And we had to set them up for success in this to be able to do that. And guess what? Through that process of, really setting our employees up for success to know what we do and how people could access certain services, what numbers to call, what the process was for referrals, etc. We found that many of our own employees didn't know about the services offered by the very hospital that they work for. So we were onto something there. But the point is we had this untapped potential in our market and we didn't even know necessarily what it was. So each time we went through this cycle, we found what the opportunity was there so that we could bake that into our next strategic plan. So that's untapped potential number 2. Now let's talk about untapped potential number 3, which is our existing capacity. So these are volumes of patients and work that your existing staff could handle. They have the capacity. The existing capacity is there right now for them to serve more, to do more. So in rural healthcare, the instinct when volumes drop is to add a provider or cut a position. But the bottleneck is rarely the headcount. It's the process. I've seen hospitals add providers when their ORs were running at 60 or less utilization. And they're adding those providers to try to get up the utilization. But then when you look at the surgeons, you see that they could be doing more. They have that capacity. And so we can take our existing providers, our existing OR and staff, and we could increase that utilization with our existing providers, with our existing plant, with our existing staff. And I've seen clinics have 30% of open slots. I've seen specialty referrals leak out the door because the workflow made it easier to send patients elsewhere than to schedule them internally, or they were scheduling them so far out that the patient wasn't going to wait for that and they're going to go elsewhere. In my own husband's primary care medical practice, they were able to add 1 to 3 patient visits per provider per day each and every day, 365 days per year, without adding staff or overworking them. That adds up in monthly, quarterly, annual revenue and profit. But what really makes a difference is the impact on access to care. We in this industry, especially in rural areas, we talk about provider shortages and lack of access to care. That may just be exacerbated by this type of untapped capacity. Same staff, same space, different scheduling systems and templates equals more volume. I mean, that's just an example of untapped potential. So the math can be dramatic, and it doesn't require a capital request, board approval, or recruitment cycle. This is optimizing and tapping into what you already have. And the fourth area of untapped potential is employee contributions. So the ideas of the people doing the work, your frontline staff, the nurses, the techs, registration, housekeeping, dietary, maintenance, right? All the people working for you, providers, staff, they see problems every single day that maybe I won't see as an executive, right? They have ideas, they have solutions, and they are waiting for somebody to ask, right? Most rural hospitals ask employees to fill out suggestion box or surveys. And when it comes to suggestion box, right, they sit empty maybe in a break room. Or gosh, in my hospital, it was next to the cafeteria. And for some reason, all the suggestions were about food or the cafeteria. Surprise, surprise. But, your people are likely your most underused strategic asset. And they are also your first line of innovation, right? Your first line innovators. In high reliability, there is a principle of deference to expertise, that those on the front lines are the ones with the ideas. They are already in your building, watching what's happening day in and day out. And maybe in the past, they've offered up ideas and suggestions, right? But over time, they've learned that nothing really comes of them. So they've stopped bringing them forward. They've gone quiet on you, but they haven't stopped seeing and knowing what could be done better, more efficiently, more safely, etc. They know, right? And they're willing to bring those ideas forward, and they're actually willing to help make those ideas a reality, right? And the strategy here isn't to hire outside consultants to come in and make these ideas known or to uncover these ideas that your employees already know about. It's to ask your innovators on the front lines, listen to them, and most importantly, make sure something happens with what they say, right? So, and in the work that we've been doing for 14 years now through Capstone Leadership Solutions and our partnership approach with small and rural healthcare organizations, is we actually help them create structures, like a structure of employee-driven organization-wide improvement teams, and even a system like cascaded goals that invite employee ideas and contributions. So some people don't know, like, how do you increase employee engagement? You create structures and systems that invite it. So we have a cadence of purposeful activity and a way of gathering the ideas and then acting on the ideas. So not only can employees have a voice, but they can have a hand in change. But really, underlying all of this, as I kind of mentioned at the start, is why do we chase new? If these untapped areas are so obvious, why doesn't everybody, as part of their strategy, go after these places, right? But really, it's because New somehow feels strategic, right? Launching a new service line, buying a new piece of equipment, hiring a new provider. These are visible, right? They go in the annual report, they get announced at the board meeting, and they feel like progress, right? They feel like strategy. And tapping what already exists feels like maintenance, like keeping the lights on, like the work we should already be doing. And that perception is the trap. So here's the math reality in rural healthcare. New requires more resources, approvals, new risk, new timelines. And just doing that takes you away from improving or growing what you already have. In thin margin rural hospitals, every new initiative competes with the budget, the staff, and the attention for what you already have. And what's exciting is that tapping what's existing is almost always faster, cheaper, and lower risk. And this matters, it almost always produces a bigger result than the new thing would have. It takes a long time to get a new thing to break even and then to profit and then to productivity, all of that. That takes so much time. So the biggest strategic clarity you can have as a rural healthcare leader is the discipline to ask, before we add anything new, what's already here that we haven't fully used or optimized? So that's really, I guess, the challenge to you that I would make this week is, before you greenlight your next big initiative, do this. Walk through your organization with new eyes, with eyes for these 4 untapped potential categories: employee and patient experience, your market, your existing capacity, your employee contributions, almost like doing a waste walk, right? In lean, doing a waste walk and identifying waste. Untapped potential. It's waste, right? That single move before you spend $1 on something new is almost certainly your biggest growth and improvement lever. So if you are a rural healthcare leader who wants a structured way to work through this with your leadership team, I would love to talk. At Capstone, we help both with strategy development, but we're very much known for strategy deployment or execution. And we help leaders and employees in rural hospital tap into what's already there. And our work is built specifically for the realities in small and rural healthcare organizations. So if you're wanting to reach out to learn more about our strategic planning or our execution support, you can find a link in the show notes to book a conversation. Our website is capstoneleadership.net. There is a contact us page there as well, or you will find a link to that in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to being back next week with another episode of Culture Change RX. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.